I'm Logan, a 19-year-old first-year medical student from Texas, now living in New York City. My parents are back in Dallas, and it's just the two of them at home. My dad, a surgeon at a university hospital, and my mom, who stays at home. After high school, I moved to New York to pursue my dream of becoming a doctor, inspired by my dad's career. It's been nearly 4 months since I started living on my own, and while I'm thrilled to be in medical school, I haven't had the chance to enjoy the typical college experience I had hoped for. Balancing my studies is crucial, but I also wanted to engage in campus life, hanging out with friends, joining clubs, and participating in campus events. Unfortunately, financial constraints have made this difficult. Although my parents cover my tuition, I'm responsible for all my living expenses. Alongside my classes, I've taken on various jobs, tutoring, event staffing, and bartending to make ends meet. Despite juggling multiple shifts and working nearly every weekend, I still struggle to cover my rent and other living costs. The demands of my schedule are taking a toll on me, leaving me exhausted and sleepy during classes and too drained to study after late nights at work. It's been a tough road, both mentally and physically. I'm worried about possibly having to repeat the year because I'm struggling to keep up with my classes. If things don't improve, I won't be able to focus on my studies, which should be my top priority. I felt overwhelmed and desperate, so I reached out to my mom for a small financial boost. Since my dad's demanding job kept him away often, my mom handled the household finances. I thought my dad's income would make it possible to get some financial help, but my mom told me they couldn't afford it, and even covering my tuition was a stretch. With no other options, I decided to keep pushing through my jobs. Most of my friends who lived on their own received financial help from their parents, and I couldn't help but feel envious. Despite everything, I resolved to keep working hard. After the midterm exams, which I hadn't studied enough for, I had to take retests. I finished them at the beginning of August and then started my summer break. My plan was to work as much as possible during the break to save up. When the summer ended, I intended to shift my focus back to my studies, so I planned to cut down on my work shifts. To balance this, I decided to further reduce my living expenses. For meals, I stuck to cheap options like instant noodles, bread, and discounted pre-packed meals. I also used my bike for transportation to save on costs whenever I needed to go somewhere. I grew up in a wealthy family, so money was never a concern for me. I never imagined I would experience such extreme poverty. After moving to New York, my life became incredibly busy, but I stayed in touch with a college friend through text messages. Seeing their fun photos made me feel sad, realizing how different my life had become. Even though my friends at the university often invited me out, I had to decline because I didn't have the money or time. "Let's go somewhere that doesn't cost anything," one of my classmates texted me. "Nah, I'm working every day. Plus, I'm heading back home for the holidays, so I won't be around," I replied. "Are you sure you're okay? You always seem tired at school, and I think you're working too much," my friend expressed concern. "I've got the physical stamina, and I need to cover my living expenses. Let's meet up once school starts again," I responded. With that, I headed to the bar where I work, but shortly after, I collapsed during my shift. It was a hectic Friday with lots of customers and orders, and as I was carrying drinks, I felt dizzy. I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The doctor informed me that I had collapsed due to exhaustion and malnutrition. I was given some medication and was allowed to go home the same day. I immediately called my boss at the bar to apologize. He told me that after I collapsed, he had called my name but received no response, so he called an ambulance. He had also informed my parents, "You've been taking on a lot of shifts, and I've relied too much on you. "I'm sorry about that. I want you to rest for the rest of the month," my boss said. That meant a significant cut in my income. As I rode the subway home from the hospital, I wondered if I should take on more tutoring jobs, feeling uncertain about my next steps. I was supposed to work at the bar the next day, but that suddenly turned into a day off. I decided to spend the day resting quietly in bed. When I checked my phone, I saw a message from my friend that I had missed while I was unconscious. I responded, explaining the delay. After learning about my situation, my friend decided to visit. He brought groceries and cooked spaghetti for me. While eating the meal he had prepared, our conversation shifted to living expenses for someone living alone. When I mentioned that I wasn't receiving any financial support from home, my friend was taken aback. "That's why you've been working so hard. Your dad's a doctor. You should be getting some support." "No, I asked Mom, and she said they're barely managing with just my tuition." "Really? But you're an only child, right? Maybe if you ask, they could send a little support." Mom said even a small amount of support was out of the question. "No way. That doesn't make sense. I hate to say this, but maybe your dad is sick and can't work." "I see. I thought about it. My dad is a doctor, used to drive a luxury car, and our house is in an upscale neighborhood. I went to private schools my whole life. Why would Mom suddenly say they have no money?" I became suddenly worried. I immediately messaged my mom, "Are you both okay?" She replied after a while, "We're fine," but I couldn't shake the worry that she might be saying that just to keep me from fretting. Since I had planned to go home for the holidays, I decided to talk to my parents about this. After thanking my friend, he joked, "I'll be waiting for some souvenirs." I felt grateful to have such a supportive friend. The holiday season arrived, and I booked the cheapest flight I could find back home. I could only stay for a night and a day because of my job, but I was eager to go. When I arrived, my parents greeted me at the door. My dad seemed shocked when he saw me. "You've lost a lot of weight." "Really? I hadn't noticed, but I apparently looked quite different." My mom was also taken aback and fell silent. For lunch, my mom had prepared a spread of salad, soup, and chicken wings, and for the first time in a long while, the three of us sat down to eat together. As soon as we began eating, my dad, looking concerned, asked, "You look thinner. Are you eating properly?" I told him the truth. "Not really. It's been a while since I had such a luxurious meal." "What do you usually eat?" "Cafeteria food." "Nah, the cafeteria is too expensive for me." "Is it that expensive?" "It's about $5 or so." My dad looked puzzled. "Is the money I've been sending enough for you?" I was confused and replied, I haven't been getting any money." My dad was stunned. "What do you mean? So you're saying you haven't received any money for the past 4 months?" "I haven't received any." "Have you really been sending money?" "I had asked your mom to transfer $2,000 every month into your account." "Really?" I was shocked. Mom had told me that our finances were tight and that she couldn't afford to send any money. My dad looked perplexed. "We have enough money." He immediately turned to Mom. "Paley, have you been sending money to Logan properly?" Mom looked down, silent. I was worried that maybe Dad had fallen ill or something and couldn't work, which was why the money hadn't been coming. "No, I've been working as usual." "Really? That's a relief." I felt somewhat reassured, but then why hadn't any money been sent to me? I was baffled. "Paley, what's going on?" Mom still remained silent, refusing to meet our eyes. "Come on, don't stay silent. Can you explain?" When Dad pressed her, Mom said quietly, "I haven't sent any money." "What?" "I haven't sent any money to Logan." Hearing this, both my dad and I were stunned. What? Why not? Dad was incredulous. There are just so many expenses. What kind of expenses? Isn't our home mortgage already paid off? Unable to hide the truth any longer, Mom dropped a bombshell. I've been keeping the money for myself. I was dumbstruck. I read online that medical students can earn more than regular students with tutoring jobs, so I thought you'd be okay. I asked you to send me even just a small amount of money, but honestly, I didn't realize you were that strapped for cash. My mom continued in a matter-of-fact tone. There was a call from Logan's workplace recently saying you collapsed from overwork. I was also shocked to see how thin you've become today. What? Logan collapsed. What happened? It seemed my dad hadn't been informed about the recent events, so I explained. You collapsed from overwork and malnutrition. Yeah, but it wasn't anything serious. Heisley, why didn't you tell me? I'm sorry. I was afraid you'd find out I wasn't sending the money. Hearing this, my dad was furious. This is outrageous. Logan had to work until he collapsed because he didn't have any money. I didn't mean any harm, my mom said, showing no sign of guilt. What have you been using all the money for? My dad confronted my mom. After a brief pause, she spoke up. Well, actually, I have some debts. What? Those were unimaginable words from her, who always seemed to perfectly manage the household and even took care of the garden flowers. The money was used to pay off my debts. Debt? How much do you owe? My dad asked, his disbelief clear. My mom, still looking down, said, about $100,000. $100,000? I was shocked by the amount. My dad sighed deeply. Why do you have so much debt? I got into gambling basically. She had accrued substantial gambling debts without our knowledge. Why would you even start something like that? My dad was holding his head in his hands. About 2 years ago, I started gambling just to kill time. I won some money, and it felt really good at first. I only used small amounts, but going to the casino became a habit, and I started betting more and more. I couldn't stop, and it led to that amount. I had never gambled, so I couldn't understand why she couldn't stop. Yes, I kept trying to win back what I lost, but I ended up losing more often than winning. I even dipped into our savings. So you spent more than just the debt amount. My dad yelled at my mom. How much of our savings did you use? About $30,000. I stopped withdrawing more because I thought you would find out. She looked like she was about to cry. If you had talked to me about it earlier, it might have been better. With that amount, you could have worked part-time and paid it back little by little. Right when he said this, she shouted, I absolutely don't want to work part-time. Get a grip. You racked up the debt yourself. What are you saying? He was visibly angry. I've been a stay-at-home mom for so long. There's no way I can work now. That's why I borrowed money from payday lenders. I was stunned by her selfish reasoning. Then the interest piled up, and the debt just grew. I got involved with various lenders, and now I can't make payments anywhere. I'm completely overwhelmed. My dad sighed again. Are you still gambling in this situation? Yes. I see no choice. Then I'll pay off the debt for you, he said firmly. Really? My mom stood up from her chair, her face brightening with joy. I knew you would help me. She rushed towards him, looking moved. However, things didn't turn out as favorably for her. But this is your severance. Let's get a divorce. What? I was shocked. Divorce? I will never agree to a divorce. Her face turned from joy to terror, as if she had been cast down from heaven to hell. You continued gambling even knowing Logan was struggling, right? You kept borrowing money, endangering the family. That's true, but I can't continue as a family with a wife who prioritizes gambling over her son. No way. She finally burst into tears. I'll never gamble again. Please forgive me, she pleaded, but he seemed resolute. Your gambling is likely an addiction. You'll need to see a psychiatrist and undergo long-term treatment. It's not uncommon for people to relapse into gambling during treatment. I'm not addicted. I can stop anytime. No, if this continues, we could all end up destitute. I have to separate, not just for my sake, but to stop burdening Logan any further. I'll stop from tomorrow. She did not seem to grasp the severity of her gambling problem. I was deeply anxious about the amount of debt and her pathological gambling behavior. In exchange for paying your severance, there will be no division of assets, my dad stated firmly. What? I can't agree to those terms. If you don't pay back the debt, they might seize your account. She fell silent. I never imagined coming home after a long time would lead to this situation. I was just unsettled by my parents fighting. No, Dad, don't you think we can hold off on deciding about divorce? Maybe take some time to cool off and think it over. I'm sorry, Logan, but that's not possible, he said calmly. I thought he might have decided on divorce in a fit of despair, but that didn't seem to be the case. Lunch ended in a heavy atmosphere, and I retreated to my room. I lay down on the sofa, but I could still hear my parents arguing. It wasn't much of an argument. My mom was hysterically screaming, and my dad responded firmly. Frustrated with both college and home, I eventually fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. The next morning, my mom looked awful, probably from crying all night. I had planned to stay at home a bit longer, but the oppressive atmosphere made me decide to leave early. My dad drove me to the airport. Apparently, Mom didn't agree to the divorce during their argument yesterday. Logan, I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused. I'm sorry, he apologized to me. No, it's not your fault, Dad. I'm grateful for the chance to attend medical school. I'll start transferring an allowance directly to your account from now on, so don't worry. Yeah, thanks, Dad. It really helps. I know things are tough, but take care. I flew back to New York. The rest of the summer vacation was busy with work, passing by in a flash. Still, I was constantly worried about my parents. A few months later, I heard that my mom finally agreed to the divorce. My dad's steadfastness broke her resistance. As previously discussed, my dad took on her debts, and in return, there was no asset division in their divorce agreement. I have mixed feelings about my parents getting divorced, but it's not all bad news. Now that I'm receiving an allowance from my dad, I've been able to cut back on work and focus more on my studies. I might even get to hang out with friends. I heard from my grandmother on my mother's side that despite the divorce over her gambling, my mom was back at the slot machines every day. She quickly racked up more debt. Her family couldn't afford to cover her debts, so my mom reluctantly started working part-time. She's currently attending therapy to overcome her gambling addiction.